Yo, new intro. You know, it's our little wait screen. That's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never have to complain about the music ever again.
Yes, because we picked it. And also this lovely background now that we have for our restream, we also picked that. We wanted very much chill gay space vibes was the assignment.
I can get behind that. I watch enough vaporwave videos on YouTube to match this energy.
Yes, this is good energy. We love it. Yeah. This is the kind of energy we want to bring to our show. Which, welcome to LessThan3NPC, everybody, a show where me, my friend Joe, my friend Kara, we talk about all the things that are too serious to talk about while playing video games every other week here on our rotating Twitch channels.
Mm-hmm.
Which surprisingly has worked every time so far, which I'm like stoked about. So
yeah. We are on episode 7. We've done
somehow, some way.
Yeah. We have been consistent at this for 14 weeks.
Which is bonkers.
Yeah, which is probably the most consistent thing I've done in the last 2 years.
Right.
It's definitely the most consistent thing I've done in the last year, being unemployed. So yeah. Very happy about that.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here today. I'm having a good day.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. I'm if I'm a little all over the place today with the trains of thoughts. I've got a lot of things going on at work and I got a lot of things going on at home. So I apologize in advance, but I think it'll be good. Today we're talking about evolving identity, and then maybe later on, if we get to it, we'll talk about coming out. But identity is very important for us humans. We like to put ourselves in little boxes. Basically all the time. We like to put other people in boxes. We just like boxes as humans. You would think we were cats. I mean, some of us are.
It helps our brains feel better about the world.
Yeah. So I guess I feel like the most basic place to start is, how do we each identify? Like, what is our identity? How do we identify?
Like on a personal level?
Yeah.
Individual? Non-binary, polyamorous, demisexual, or the boxes, labels, things they like. Oh, I also like quirky alone.
Quirky alone?
Quirky alone. It's a lesser known thing. Sasha Cogan, I think, wrote a book about it. And I could post this in the Discord. Quirky alone is just sort of a way of sort of looking at relationships, and sort of trying to challenge the notion that a person is incomplete without a romantic dynamic, and sort of resist the urge to date for dating's sake, and that if you're not dating, if you're not in a relationship, then you are wrong or broken. Some folks like to interpret it as like the first relationship you have is with yourself, and so some people go so far as to really actually formalize a marriage with themselves in some respects. It's not anti-relationship. I know in her book she talks very much about it being a lot of quirky loans identify themselves as being like hyper romantic, as in like I have ideals that I'm not going to compromise myself for. I'm gonna hold out for the relationship I think I deserve and not be worried about being alone. So it's like I'm not going to sacrifice the relationship I want, the relationship I envision for myself, just to match society's thought that I should be in a relationship. So I won't get too far into that. I'm going to throw it over to Kara.
It's another episode, Joe.
That could be another episode.
Put it in the chart.
I'll throw the hot potato over to Kara.
All right. Jeez, hey. Boxes. Boxes. Yeah,
Or labels,
I mean,
however you want.
labels. I guess I would identify as a lesbian. I identify as cisgendered. I identify as demisexual. I identify as mostly quirky alone. I remember reading the book you gave me, Joe, and most of it matching up with what I thought as well. But there were a few things that I didn't quite get on board with. Hence another episode for that later.
Dang it, I have to read this book.
Yeah. And I don't know, identify. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. I have a little bit of.
I feel like feminist is an identifier.
Yeah, for sure identify as a feminist. I identify as a creative. As in that is kind of what I see my purpose in life as being is trying to be a storyteller or a creative person. Yeah, I mean those are the ones that come to mind immediately.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Yeah, I identify as non-binary in my gender way. Sexuality-wise, I just like queer. I mean, like, I do on occasion call myself a lesbian, but it's more when the term lesbian fits the conversation that I'm having, or specifically fits the whatever joke I'm trying to do. Because I make lots of jokes about being gay. But like I would say I more identify as queer. What else? I identify as a feminist. I guess I too would also put myself in that creator category. Because I make the things, but I like making the things. It is the thing that makes my heart happy and gives me identity and joy. Because if I didn't create things, I kind of don't know what I would be.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is like I feel like it's a part of an identity, kind of in that way.
It's not like I have a job, but like I personally am a creative.
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Like it's even outside of the work bracket, right? Yeah. You would still have a purposeful outlet to be creative.
Because I was making things, and I was making what I would I don't know. I guess what people would call like art or creative pursuits way before I was ever paid for it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting to me that we, like, as humans, put ourselves in these different labels and these different boxes, because ultimately, like, the human experience is so nuanced that a singular label doesn't really define or really even explain anything about a person. Because there's so many definitions to even a single label. Like, what kind of feminist? A first wave feminist? A second wave feminist? A third wave feminist? A trans exclusionary radical feminist? Like, what kind of feminist?
I mean, I make that argument that you're not a feminist if you apply that, but anyway, that's a side.
But it's a label that people use.
Well,
like, it's it's useful language in that it defines a certain kind of person. But ultimately, the labels do nothing, but they also do everything.
Yeah.
Because even how a person decides to define themselves says something about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is where, I get in probably some arguments with more left-leaning folks as well, is that I'm kind of I look at a lot of this stuff as like more literal. I find labels to be much more in the avenue of like say what you mean kind of space. And I know that a lot of people take a lot of liberty with transforming language and words and labels, and that's for their own prerogative, and I have no business messing with that. But I do have quite a bit of defensive-ness when people try to change that perspective for myself or my own definition of things.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of times when people will question, you know, a different aspect of an identity and be like, well, that's not appropriate because you do this and that's not what that label does. And I'm just like, well, okay, in your eyes, I guess that's how you're going to play that out. Good luck. Right. And I get that there's a lot of discourse and conversation, especially that happens online around labels and identity and all that stuff. But as for me, I opt out. I don't want to be a part of those conversations. I always see my identity and my labels that apply to me, and that's all that matters. And that's how I see the world.
Yeah. I mean, even the label lesbian kind of comes with its own like stigma, which is why I've in past years I've sort of separated myself from that. Like, you know, when people ask, I usually say queer. Because for some people there are certain definitions of lesbian for which I don't apply. Like because I have and am open to dating trans people, like trans men and women and non-binaries, like because I do not subscribe to being exclusively with cis women, then I am not a lesbian to certain people because I don't fit into that box.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
I think for me, like the whole, in terms of like being invested in identities or boxes or whatever, I'm on. I think it plays into the non-binary aspects of who I am, where it's like I don't really fit in them anyways. I think I gravitate towards the identities because, or the identifiers, I guess I'll call them. I gravitate towards the identifiers because it helps make sense of the person that I feel that I am, and it helps define things. But I think in externalizing that for other people, I think other people can read into an identity too much, right?
Oh yeah.
Or not give you a chance to further explain what that identity means to you, right? So someone like, I'll say non-binary, right? And you know, someone could get really attached to that, right? And say, well, you have a very specific gender expression, right? It's like, well, I do, I suppose, but, and I've talked about this before, my gender expression isn't, I understand that it's coded masculine, but when I see myself, like when I look at myself in this video stream here, I don't see man. I see a non-binary person with a great beard, right? And so I think it, and this is just my own personal opinion here, I think we can get way too wrapped up in performing to the definition of whatever identity we're claiming, you know, or we can be pressured into performing to that, or other people can, you know, be mad at us for not performing correctly, right?
Yeah.
So my investment in them is, I like them for certain purposes, but I'm not, I don't know. It's I'm in a weird place. Again, non-binary. I float around. Non-binary folks. We just float around. We're not really attached or tethered to things.
We're just whatever. But yeah, it's like, I do remember though, as like a younger person being first of all, way more attached to labels. Like whether or not I was a femme, whether or not I was like bi or gay, or like what counted as one or the other, like, you know, whatever. Like I thought, like, as a young person, I was very attached to labels because there's so few avenues with which to pursue the world as a young person and understand it. And the labels sort of become a way for you to understand things. And unfortunately, because they're such broad, sweeping statements, you lose a bunch of nuance in what those terms actually mean, and like the people behind those terms, that you sort of end up just putting people's in boxes, and then you have to meet those people to really learn from how deep a label can go. But I do remember having this sort of moment, like whenever I figured out that like gay was a thing. It's like, oh, that's a label I can have? that's a thing that I could put on me. That's a sticker I could put on me to identify with. Well, that's great because I'm a teenager and I don't know who I am at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. I'm just going to be that for now. Just gay is my identity. Gay and nerd is my identity.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I am as a person because I don't have a fully formed frontal lobe. And even like getting older and like with all of the like things that trans people have taught us about like gender expression and like the gender spectrum and non-binary and stuff, like when figuring out there was a word for a way that I felt, there was a label that I could put on myself to make myself more easily recognizable by the people around me. Like that was nuts. That was a thing that was so like I couldn't believe it that I had to like sit with it for several years before I was like, maybe I should start telling these people this word that I could use to describe myself.
Yeah.
But it's like sort of an elation to like figure out a thing that fits.
Yeah. Oh, it's like that, and that was very much. I discovered non-binary when I was 30, and it was just a mindfuck moment where I'm like, so that you could be that, like that's a thing. And then the follow-up thought was like, Jesus Christ, I wish I would have had this when I was fucking 20, because this would have explained a lot. So I definitely agree, Des, that like there can be a kind of elation initially when you find the thing, because I think it means you're not alone in something you thought you were alone with for so long, right? Not feeling, I've talked about this before, but like feeling like you missed memos your whole life, and then you find this thing that's like, oh shit, there are other people that feel this way. Oh damn, this is fun. So that's where I think what labels can be really useful. Boxes can be really useful, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're humans at all. Like I mean, I won't say all. It is a very human thing to want a community and to like be able to identify with a group of people because we feel safe in numbers.
Yeah.
And like you share at least something in common with me. We have this commonality. We have like theoretically we have these same ideals and these same values. So I would like to be around you more. I mean, even as far as like sex workers, like, because I work in sex work and I have a hard time labeling myself as a sex worker. And that's sort of a thing I've gone back and forth with other sex workers about is like, are you though? Like even on like, especially online sex workers have sort of this thing. It's like, well, I don't know that I can really call myself a sex worker because I'm not an escort because I don't meet clients in person. I just like am on the internet.
Yeah.
It's like, so like, or like, the doms that are fully clothed and never do a nude scene in their lives. It's like, and sometimes it's like, I don't know that I want to be. Do you have Queen Poopy Butt in?
Yeah, she's still Queen Poopy Butt. So I don't really want to hold her. She's literally scooting right now because she's so mad. Oh my god. Sorry. She's
Queen Poopy Butt for stuff.
She needed me to know she was existing in my space right now. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that like there's kind of two sides to it. It's like I don't feel like I do enough to be considered a sex worker. And there's also like this sort of hierarchy thing that happens where it's like, I'm not a sex worker. I don't do that.
Sorry, I've never heard hierarchy before in my life.
Yeah, it's a thing.
It's the best term.
Come on, Garrett, get up your terminology.
But it's the best way to describe it, in that some whores think that they are morally superior to other whores because of the things that they do for money.
Yeah.
It's a known phenomenon in the sex industry.
Yep.
Copy that.
Because, like,
copy.
I won't say this is true of all people, clearly, but the general consensus is that, like, strippers think they're better than escorts who, and, like, dominatrixes feel like they're better than strippers, and then online doms feel like they're better than dominatrixes, and fin doms think they're better than other online doms, and like it's like a whole thing because it's like the level of separation. Because like socially, you're not in a great place as a sex worker.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, you know, gay people hating on trans people. It's like you're, as a gay person, typically, you know, depending on where you're at, you're probably low on the social totem pole. So you kind of want to, like, the urge is to punch down.
Yeah.
Which would be at trans people who are on an even lower portion of the social totem pole. The same thing happens in sex work. So it's like this thing of like, do I call myself a sex worker? I've sold sexual services for money, not in person, but also I don't have the same level of risk because of the way that I sell sexual services for money that other sex workers have. So it almost feels weird for me to take that title because I don't engage in the same level of risk.
Yeah.
So the labels can be useful and they can be not useful. They can be more stressful than useful.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like just to expand or like tap into that or continue that narrative, I think just from my perspective, like it was one thing finding non-binary and having that elation. But I know in my journey, and part of this is evolving identity, was not experiencing the same sort of like gender dysphoria or like body dysphoria around the fact that I do have masculine coded features. I know for like other non-binary folks, there's a real push to move towards a different gender expression once they have found non-binary. Some folks push to more androgynous sort of gender expression. Others will be more fluid and move between feminine, masculine, androgynous. You know, they'll move all over the spectrum. I don't feel that impulse. Again, I've talked about how I see myself and don't feel that pull to change the gender expression too much. And so there's a phase, and there still is a big part of me where it's like, do I feel that I can claim this? Do I feel how do I do non-binary so that I can legitimately claim it? You know, of course, this would never be something I'd impose on somebody else. This is only something I do for myself because for lots of different reasons. But I think I've heard lots of stories from queer folks not feeling queer enough, you know, big quotes around that, big heteronormative quotes around that. And again, I think we know where a lot of that's coming from, where a lot of it's coming from heteronormative aspects of society and the general anti-queerness that still exists in our world. I think things have improved, like in significant ways over the last couple of decades. But I think from what I see now, like if you fit into a certain queer box, society is going to tolerate you, right? But if you are more in the margins of those boundaries between the different letters in the alphabet soup that is the LGBTQIA2S plus acronym, there's more discomfort. And I think that shows that society really at large isn't actually, they're at a specific place with their understanding of queer folks, right? If you're a gay cis white man and you act accordingly, people are going to be okay with that, right? But if you deviate from any of the expected scripts, people aren't okay with that, right?
Yeah.
Or they're more confused or what have you. And so it leads to this weird sort of like self-gaslighting thing around like, well, I like this identity, but I don't identify with how I've seen other people embody it, right? So can I really claim it? Am I really allowed to claim this identity? And I don't know, to be perfectly honest, that's something that I still wrestle with to this day. I'm more out than I have been. Like I've been putting non-binary, like we had to fill out like roster cards for my lifeguard courses, and I put non-binary they them, and had one of 3 of my instructors, respect my pronouns, which wasn't a big thing, because code switching is important for safety's sake. But it felt good to have the one instructor, quietly slip the they them in there, here and there, which was awesome. But I still, to be perfectly honest, I still fear saying it out loud and having to explain it. If there's other queer folks in the room, how are they going to react? I don't know, right? There's still lots of fear around it, lots of irrational fear that I think is connected back to that heteronormativity. But that's enough ranting from me. But I'll pass it to Kara or Ted.
I am not the label I appear to be. It's like Jedi mind trick them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I have a hard time really having a lot of these more dynamic conversations about identity, because it's really something that I have troubles with it, because it's one of those things where I really don't think it's anyone else's business, right? I don't believe in receipts for identity. So Joe, when you talk about having the belief of whether or not you're queer enough to accept a label or whatever, I've gotten to a point in my life where I look at that and it's like, it's no one else's business, right? You don't owe anyone anything, and other people don't owe you anything for your identity. And what you accept yourself as being in this world, and what makes you comfortable in this world. What we do need to start asking of society is just having the space for education and learning. And like you said, Joe, you only heard the term non-binary when you were 30, right? Society is always going to be slower than it is the niche environments that they are birthed from. This is a reality. It's like when you talk about the box of the cis white gay male, well, that was one of the more pronounced identities that's been known for for a long time. But being integrated into society and being accepted, they are technically one of the pioneers that was first brought into the eyes of being known. And it takes time. It's like, it's the same thing that when I came out to specifically my mom, she wasn't awful about it, but she just didn't have the education or willingness to really learn and listen to a lot of the stuff, because for her, it just wasn't a dynamic that she ever really had to deal with in her life.
Yeah.
Because she's not gay. So, it's the realization of, we as ourselves, we have our lives, experienced through our own vision of in our own experiences. We have to understand that's not everyone else too, right? It's not to have the expectation that you want to give people the space to learn and ask questions and, be a better person and human being, of being like more accepting and understanding. Of course, we want that from the generalized population, but the ultimate reality is that's not everyone's experience, right? So ignorance is really a huge component of this. What's more frustrating, though, is just the sheer level of what is not ignorance, but it's hate, right? Like that's when you start going down the road, when you're talking about identities and labels, where it gets really scary. And that's why there's so much fear about people talking about labels and identity. Because they see examples of hate, they see examples of violence, they see examples of being rejected. And that's what causes the holding on to something before trusting people in your environment. I've talked about it on this show before. There's a lot of people I don't talk about my sexuality with work. Because it's none of their business, right? And I know a lot of people will be like, well, that's not changing the culture. That's not changing the environment for people to accept more about. I don't give a fuck. Some people I meet on set and I'm only going to meet them for 2 days. They don't need to know anything about me. Okay. Right. And that's for my own safety net of understanding. Like, I don't want to interact with this person. I don't want to deal with their politics. I don't want to deal with, if there's religious connotation attached to it. It's not part of my life. I don't need that. I reject that. Right. Whereas when it's coming down to the people who I care about, the people who I want in my life, the people who I deem my people, that's where it takes more time, more effort, more educating, more talking about what your identity and labels mean to me, and therefore asking of these people, hey, what does this dynamic look like? How can I help? How can I change something that I do around you to help you feel blank, 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 right?
Yeah.
And that's where I get really into this place where everyone's just like overcomplicating it. I know that's a terrible way to put it, but that's how it feels to me, right? Because it's just so frustrating that I see this discourse going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth constantly. And I'm just like, it's no one else's business except for you, right? It is your identity. This is who you are. This is who you get to figure out. This is your life. You get to make these choices.
Well, yeah. I don't know that it, like, saying it's not somebody else's business means, like, to me that means like nobody is entitled to know if you don't feel like telling them, like, which I agree with, but also, like, one of the reasons I like to talk about my identity is, and I don't do it in every situation. Like, everybody's got to keep themselves safe. Like, not everybody knows that I'm non-binary. Some people I just straight up don't want to have that conversation with because they're going to be like, why? I mean, what you're wearing eyeliner. I don't need to have that conversation with every Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes across my path. But like, I'm also okay with throwing out a label and just being like, I don't feel the need to explain this to you. Like, I'm gay. A gay person. Congratulations. Like,
yeah. But that's your choice. You're choosing to do that, right? What I'm talking about is that there's no position in place where someone has the entitlement to come into your life and tell you what your identity is based on their own perceptions of what they think that label is. That's the difference. And that's how I see it.
Yeah. I just think it's useful to talk about our identities because then, somebody who may not have known something about us previously, like, especially if it's a new friend, it's like, hey, you're a new person in my life. We have good vibes. Like, blah, blah, blah. I'm gay. I'm non-binary, whatever. I slip it into the conversation because I talk about my life. And I think that just putting a label on it might also be helpful for that person and any other non-binary or gay person that other person meets. Yeah. It's like, oh, I have a reference for who that type of person is.
Yeah.
And, like, that doesn't mean I have to be like the model gay or the model non-binary. Like, I am not a monolith of either of those labels. But I think it's just useful to talk about it. Because if we don't talk about it, then nobody knows that we exist.
Yeah. Well, and it's a practice thing too. So, like, I do agree, Kara, that, like, again, I'll just use my own example. Again, putting my non-binary identity and the they them pronouns on my little roster card that I hand in to my instructor, that's a big step for me, right? Because before, I was only really able to tell people that I had sort of some relationship with. But on the flip side, or I guess, like, as an extension of what's happening, like, I wanted my instructor to know, right? But I didn't exactly tell my classmates, right? And one of the three instructors used they them. It was nice for me to hear, nobody else really noticed, right? And I thanked the instructor afterwards. But because the reason I didn't tell the rest of my class, because the idea of telling 11 other folks, especially like folks that are way younger than me, I just didn't have the energy for that conversation. I wasn't interested in that conversation. I don't really care. If I encounter them again and maybe I work with them one day, yeah, maybe I'll let them know, because like I'm going to tell my new coworkers my identity and stuff like that, because I'm going to have an extended relationship with them, right? But again, the argument that I say for like putting it out there, like I said, I would have loved to have heard the term non-binary when I was 20, right? I wasn't roaming in the right circles to hear it, I guess, but having it out there, and this is something that I've learned from other non-binary folks in different communities who do have sort of do lean towards one gender expression or another. It was comforting to know that they are struggling with the same thing, right? They don't really feel a need to change their gender identity or their gender expression. They're comfortable in having their gender expression be one way and their gender identity being this way. And they're like, I was expressing concern, like, would people be weirded out by, somebody who looked like me using they, them pronouns? And they're like, no, it'd be validating, right? Because they know that you were going through this, you are dealing with a similar thing that I'm dealing with, right? So, but again, you're not obligated to do that work, right? And if it doesn't feel safe or you don't have the spoons, then nobody should ever feel entitled to pressure you into, you have to be out, you have to have these conversations, and you have to change the world single-handedly, right? And if you don't, you're being a bad queer person or something like that,
Yeah.
That kind of rhetoric is very toxic.
Oh, for sure. Because if I'm in a mood, I don't tell people shit.
Yep.
It's like, I have no energy. I don't wish to explain myself to you. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
That's what code switching is all about. It's a time saver and an energy saver.
I mean, I do that with my job sometimes too. Like, because to explain my job specifically is like a chore. Yeah. I do a lot of weird things in a weird industry that people have usually a lot of very invasive questions and or stories about. So if people ask, I'm usually like, yeah, I'm a photographer. I'm a social media manager. Not, I work for one of the top dominatrixes in the country and run one of the top dungeons in the country. Because then that is somehow an invitation for people to talk about all of their weird fetishes. Guess what? I don't want to talk about your weird fetish. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't know you. So that's like where a label's like not useful. Or rather, code switching for a different label is useful.
Yeah.
Because it's just too much. I don't want the conversation it brings.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a time saver and an energy saver. Yeah.
But like, even with my like particular labels, I feel like the way that those labels have evolved has been and the way that those labels evolve throughout people's lives is also incredibly interesting, because when we're born and when we're socialized, especially like here in Western culture, it's like, well, like whatever culture you're in, you're socialized to your community standards of what like you should eventually be or you should be currently. Like, the entire reason the word heteronormative exists, because it is the norm to be hetero. Or it is heteronormative is the idea that it is the norm to be hetero.
Yeah.
But like, it's not. And when you kind of figure out, as a queer person, if you figure that out later on in life, like, there's so much as a society that puts as an identifier for you, like that puts the people that you want to have sex with or marry as like your personal identity, which to me is nuts. I like my sexuality, like I add queer as an identifier because I also exist in queer communities. Like I exist with other queer people. For the majority of queer people, I believe I have a lot of the same values, like, and sort of a shared struggle. That is why I identify as queer. I don't feel like I identify as queer because I fuck a certain kind of gender. Because I shouldn't feel like my label has anything to do with anybody else. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
Like, I shouldn't be defined by other people.
Yeah.
Which is why I like queer in general. Like, you don't know what kind of gang you have. You don't know what my percentages are.
Well, and I think I think the evolution is the important aspect about it. And just looking at one of our questions, like what sparks this evolution? I think I'm, again, to speak for myself, like the relationship has evolved over time with the word. Again, there was some I was drawn to the concept of non-binary, but there was a distance because I didn't feel like I could claim it. But as I thought about it, and as, again, a lot of reflection revolved around like, well, would I question somebody else who was claiming non-binary? I'm like, of course not, right? And so why would I do that to myself? And how I think of myself and how I view myself has changed over time. But as I gave more thought to it, non-binary remained, right? And so when you do that reflection, right, and that thing still feels like it fits, then I think there's something there, right? But this is only me reflecting on it, right? I'm not looking to anybody else to define it for me or whatever. Of course, I'm taking cues from other people, but it's a gender identity. That's something internal. It's inside, right? It can't ever be defined by somebody else, right? And I think that's something that I've really sort of built my identity around, the non-binary aspect anyways, built that aspect of myself around. Because again, like I said, there's still fear that external input is going to influence and going to tap into that negative self-talk and that self-gaslighting around, well, Joe, you're not, come on, you're not actually non-binary, right? But again, the fact that like, no, it's still, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, I think I'm at a loss for words here. Like, it's that internal sense that you can't ever really put solid words to, you know?
Yeah.
Well, that's how identities get cemented or affixed to you to begin with, is because it feels familiar, it feels comfortable, right? Like, I think there's a really big experience that happens when we accept a label, because there's a lot of like, it's like a release of tension, it's a release of understanding that you are constantly seeking out something. And whenever you have an experience that goes against that, that's when it brushes up against it, you know. And that's why coming out is such a diverse experience for a lot of people, because it's an unknown, and there's a lot of aspects to it that people just are really concerned about. But it's usually because it's this like pent up thing. It's like you've discovered something about yourself, you found vocabulary to apply to you, but that vocabulary makes you feel more secure, more whole, more everything. So it's really about navigating what that means to you. Like, there's people who will never come out and they will never tell a single person that they're queer or whatever, but internally they might feel like they are. Right. And that's the label that they identify with. And that's completely like, this is what I talk about. No receipts required.
Yeah.
You know, for them, that's great. And that's how they choose to live their lives. And that's how they're going to live their lives. And that's great. On the full other side of it is you see people where it's just like tattoo gay on the forehead and let's go. Like, that's how some people exist, and that's how they choose to live their lives, right? And that identity to them is like a lot more perhaps in value to be outwardly shown out to other people than it is for others, right? It's about gatekeeping. Like that's why I get so, I don't want to say upset about this conversation. It's just like I'm tired of it. Like I'm just, it's so exhausting that people are just so society's self-absorbed with trying to control this. It's you know, I would hope we will eventually get to a point where people just are capable of being who they are, and they're navigating their ways through the world, and people just respect identities and labels and boundaries, as we were talking about before on that other time on the show, and just navigate life that way without this like constant labeling of shame and confusion and stuff like that. Like it's just, yeah, it's exhausting. And I think a lot of people may sympathize with that feeling. Whereas I know that there's other people out there who their sole purpose is to just keep navigating this and finding as much they can to dissect it and investigate it. And I guess I've just gotten to a point in my life where I'm like, I'm done with, like, I feel so comfortable where I am. I think that's where I'm at. And that's why I don't have like a huge charge of energy to go explore the dynamics of syntax and the English language of defining stuff, right?
Well, I don't think labels need to be serious. Like I love this new wave of finding a random object and then adding the word gay at the end of it, like teacup gays. And and just, you know, like all the different kinds of gays that you can be, because I think that that's like a creative expression of a label. That's something that is uniquely to you or uniquely to your style or your vibe. I think that's fun. Like, yeah, I think there's fun ways to play with language and to play with the ways in which we identify, and to use a sort of a common baseline, but to modify that baseline into a way that is you and you can express to other people. And if this were purely a social conversation of like, we're just talking about social constructs, then yeah, I don't think it's necessarily anybody's business what you identify as, because there's no, in a social context, there's almost no reason to advocate for like, or not even advocate, like just to exemplify a thing. But because the society of us does not, the socialness of us does not exist in a bubble, we deal with things like legalities, like laws, like protection and stuff. So that's like what inspires me to talk about my identity. Yeah. Because I want people to know that when a thing happens, somebody they know is directly affected by it.
Yeah. Well, I just want to jump in there and say, like, it's not just the legality thing too. I think it's like the social and gender scripts that exist in a heteronormative society, right? Because if you look masculine, you are expected to perform a certain list of things. If you look feminine, you're expected to perform a certain list of things. And if you deviate from that list, there are social sanctions to push you back into line, right? Early identified by first and second, probably I'd say second wave feminists, and then sort of expanded on by the queer movements of sort of the late 70s, 80s-ish, and extended to today, right? And I think that's the other aspect of it, because I think the social sanctions that exist in our world can be just as damaging as sort of the legal sanctions that exist out there. So like the legal sanctions around not being able to see your partner in the hospital, right, is one thing. But the social sanctions of being excluded from a community, right, are also equally damaging, right? Being denied work, employment, housing, right? So yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but like I just wanted to speak to like the social aspect, the social sanctions, the social consequences.
Yeah, and it doesn't exist in a bubble.
Yeah. So the fact that some people don't come out per se, like, I think we need to honor that there's probably really good reasons for that we probably don't understand or won't ever understand or what have you, right? So
yeah. I worry about this broad conversation of generalizing this idea that all of society is going to change, right? I'm not saying that's what we're talking about here right now. What I'm talking about is like you have these things where some people will go off and they'll be like, well, all of society will change with us if we talk about it enough. I'm like, and maybe that's the pessimist in me talking, is that the reality is there will always be intolerance in this world. There always will be. I don't believe in utopian, futures where everyone is just full on accepting of everyone else. I don't believe it. I have a hard time looking at human nature that has been shown in the past of our documented history, to recognize that can exist across the board. There's no way, in my view. What I love to see and what I do appreciate seeing is when we see like targeted shifting, right? So pushing for laws that, remove the barriers to the queer community in terms of the jobs and all these other things, and putting things in standard like printed form, being like, you can't do this because now you know that I'm gay, right? Like, the discrimination, the inequality, all those factors. But it's just like I'll talk about, how women are seen in the workplace. Like that's been being fought for 100+ years now. It doesn't mean that we're now seen equally across the board in society. Of course not. We're putting up with all that crap no matter what anyway.
Yeah.
Just in a different probably potency of it or method of it. But that's the frustration, right? And that's what I'm talking about when we're saying like it's so important to have these conversations with the people who are actually going to engage in them. Right? Backcountry schmuck boy from, I don't know, I'm generalizing here in Alberta, Innisfail, isn't going to give two shits about who I am and my sexuality and all those things, right? What he cares about is him and his family and whatever that unit is. And maybe he's super religious and that's the things that he thinks is important in this world. And that's the world that he wants to protect, right? I may never have any influence on him, no matter how many times I talk to him. So what I would rather put my energy towards is the people in my community who we can lift each other up. And maybe that lifting up then leads to talking about reform in terms of like laws or how communities react to certain things, or, that's what I'm trying to say is just like, it's, I don't think it's beneficial for people in the queer community to go for this like super vague mass acceptance, because intolerance will always exist. And that's how we've seen change for like the many, many decades before us it's just like, no, it's political. We change the laws. And then that forces people to change socially in a dynamic as a community. And then you kind of build off from there. And that's just the reality of, unfortunately, having minority groups. And your voices just aren't taken as seriously, right? It always feels like you're screaming to the sky and no one's listening, right? And it's something that I think we have to just keep maintaining as time continues on. Keep pushing for, what is in the benefit of people's rights as humans, and then cultivating and supporting our community within itself, right? And then that always leads to better improvement generally, for the most part. That's how I see it.
But if we never talk to people outside of those communities, then how do we ever get them to see us as people?
I'm not saying that you would never talk to those people. I'm saying you cultivate it within your own community first and you build outwards from that. I don't think it's beneficial to go outwardly and expecting everyone to just accept you flat out. It's just never going to happen.
No, and I'm not saying that that's what that is. I mean, like, I'll give an example. so my girlfriend works at a long-term care facility, an old folks home, essentially. And there is a ton of old, homophobic, racist people in the old folks home because they grew up in a different generation when different things were known as truth and different things were considered okay. And some of them have learned and some of them have like gone up with the times and they figured it out and they're generally okay with everyone. And that's generally most of them, as far as I know, as far as the stories that my girlfriend's told me. Specifically, there was this one who she was, specifically my girlfriend works in a memory care unit, so she was like not the most talkative, didn't, was sick and wasn't really like a responsive kind of person. And my girlfriend is one of those people who like it's her job as the activities staff to like get the old people out and make them smile and make them go do crafts and like go do things and have and feel enriched and feel connected to other humans because they're basically in this like sad condo for the rest of their lives. And she does that with everyone, and she's also entirely out at her work regardless of whatever. She doesn't wear rainbow bracelets and has a rainbow tattoo or anything, but if somebody were to ask, she would give them the truth because it's a truth that she has fought hard for. And she ended up telling this particular old woman that she was gay. Like, woman asked her about her boyfriend, and she was like, "Oh no, well I have a girlfriend," and blah blah blah. Talk about her girlfriend, and like the old lady kind of goes quiet and kind of doesn't talk to her for a little bit, but she's still doing her job. She's still trying to make things as fun as possible. Like even the grumpiest fucking old fart, she will try to make smile and she will try to make talk to them because that is the kind of person she is and that is her job and that is why she is in that job. And over time, like this woman got to know her and got to see her as a person who was joyful and who wanted joy out of other people and who really sat with people when they were sad and when they were having hard times, and like this really empathetic, loving person. And through that, like saw the humanness in her. And like at some point she pulled her aside for a conversation saying that she had years ago she had disowned her niece for being gay. And like hadn't talked to her for years, didn't want to talk to her, and for like the first time in like years she ended up talking to her niece because she understood something better about her niece through my girlfriend. And they have been over the last few months repairing that relationship now because she saw where she was ignorant.
Yeah.
And like I don't think anybody's out here to change the world. Like, no, like, especially, like, here in this crowd. None of us are fucking Elon Musk trying to fucking spend $1 billion to try to change the world or do, like, whatever. But, like, those little moments where we can show people our humanness, I think, like, she did something that directly, positively impacted a person she's never met. And a person that she's met just by being herself and just by being out and truthful. Yeah. And like it's those little things that I think are valuable. And like I don't know that they'll change the world. I don't think it'll create a utopia or anything. But if someone had done that like previously for some of my relatives, like if some of my relatives knew a gay person that was awesome, like maybe coming out would have been easier for me. So that's kind of where I come at it.
Yeah. And like I said, from my experience, sometimes like it's not necessarily about convincing another person. It's about taking up space as you are. Right? Yeah. And again, to not have heard the word non-binary until I was 30, right? That caused a lot of turmoil. So even just having encountered a person, who identified as non-binary would have been beneficial. And that is what I think about because I'm going to be teaching lots of kids, right? In my new job. And so I'm going to first, say it to my colleagues and see how that feels and all that. But I think the idea is to be visible so that if there's a little kid in my class who is feeling like they missed the memo on the gender side of things, then maybe they can come talk to me about it, or maybe they can go Google it themselves, right? Again, it's not necessarily about picking the most homophobic person in the room and trying to change their mind, right? But it's about opening the possibilities by simply existing as we are, right? But it is exhausting, and there's lots of different moments, especially very recently. A big fuck you to the governor of Florida for signing the Don't Say Gay bill into law. Get fucked wherever you are.
We just got one of those in Columbus.
Oh, good. Oh,
very excited about it. Yeah. Not enraged at all. It's fine.
No. Smiling through the rage. But yeah. And I think the other aspect, the thing to think about and acknowledge, and I do say this too, recognizing that I do still carry a lot of privileges inhabiting the body that I do. But it's exhausting work, right, to do this and to have these conversations. So I think the fact that some people don't and can't, I think that's something we want to acknowledge. We're distracted now by the cat.
That's okay. That's like 90% of the show. Look at her face. She's beautiful. We did it, you guys. We got Michaela's face on the show. It's and she's
a Janeway fan.
She's sniffing the Janeway. Oh.
She knows.
Guys, we really like animals here.
There you go. Kate, done. Sorry, Malia had to derail again.
Yeah, I don't know if
she's just checking in on all her subjects, making sure everything is as it should be.
I don't know if you can see my void sitting over here.
Moose boy.
He's my void. It's my little void dog.
It's a slightly darker portion of your carpet there.
Yeah.
Continue, Joe, before the Malaya interruption.
Oh, no. That just made me a point.
Yes, more cat, please.
I can't tell her to do anything, so...
Come here.
Maybe Des will be more successful with Pippin.
I don't know if he was just sleeping. He's looking at me like, why the fuck are you calling me over right now?
Yeah.
He'll come over soon enough. But yeah. Mm-hmm. I also there's a lot about like specific labels and stuff that I don't like though, because I don't like the like buildup of like, yes, I have finally found a label. I have thought about it in my head for the last year and a half, and I am so secure. I found this thing. I'm going to come out to everyone. 3 years later, that label doesn't apply to me. Oh God, I have to come out to everyone again.
Mm-hmm.
Like the transition from bisexual to gay, to like from bisexual to queer was big for me specifically. It's like, because I feel like I've had to come out so many fucking times to the point where it's just like, especially with like my relatives or people who don't see me on like a day-to-day, it's like, just don't assume anything about me anymore. Like, it's fine. Just whatever my sexuality is, whatever my gender, whatever my job, just don't assume anything about me. Just ask me how's it going. Because like, it's probably changed since the last time I saw you. For real. But like, when we're young and we're kind of given this sort of heteronormative culture, like the fact that our identity evolves, like, I think we've talked about this before. We hate coming out as a thing, because it's not really like a thing, because coming out implies that there's some sort of change that has occurred.
And then it's a one and done thing. You do it once and that's it.
Yeah, you pop open the curtain and you're like, hello, yes, I am the gay. But really, it's hello, yes, I have been the gay. Like, for a long time. And the assumption has been that I have been straight my entire life. And that is not the case. So I think coming out would be easier if we just didn't apply those labels to begin with. It's like, you're a blank slate, you do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
You're a child, you know, a male-born child wearing a skirt, great. Go for it. You're whatever you want to be today. You're a dinosaur, I will find you some leaves.
Yeah. Well, I think those identities exist of necessity because we live in a heteronormative patriarchy, right? Gender identity pre-colonialism wasn't as alarming to different cultures, right? I think there's lots of examples around the world where there were multiple gender identities, right? And it really wasn't seen as being a big deal. There was still an identity. There was still something that was assigned to a person, but there was much more flexibility in that. And I think the rigidity demanded this response. So as more people thought about their gender identities, their sexual identities, their political identities, whatever it happened to be, there needed to be an expansion because the initial gender binary was unrealistic and impossible, right? So there needed to be more identities that existed because they do exist, right? And so the labels that we have now are necessary because of the society in which we live, right? 100 years down the road, maybe it won't be as big of a deal, but I think they'll still be there, right? Because this isn't about erasing identity. It's more about uncoupling this idea that there are correct ones and there are deviant identities, right? There's these ones over here that we don't know how we feel about, you know?
Yeah, like homosexuality used to be in the DSM for like as being a deviant like mindset. It's like being like an abnormality in the brain.
Yep.
Like, what the fuck is that?
Oh,
I feel like when we were like, you know, just living in tribes off the land, it's like people just gave a shit less because you had to worry about like where you were getting food the next day or if the crop was going to be good that year or, you know, if wild dogs were going to come steal your food in the night. You know, we had more shit to worry about than how each individual felt. There is sort of like, I mean, especially in Western culture, there's this huge like influx of like individualism. Like we're all alone and like we're all separated. And like in plenty of other cultures, it's like you live with your family until you die. Like that's your thing. Is like you live either with or in proximity to your family until you die. You have a set community and a set like group of people until you're gone. But like we have all of this individualism in Western culture, I have big quotation marks because that's not really a thing. And like we get trapped up in these identities because we don't have inbuilt communities. And like so we're trying to find ways to like keep ourselves safe by finding people with similar identities. And like and connect to people in that way. I don't know why I'm doing raptor claws, but
well, yeah, because it's again, it comes down to understanding the value that you present yourself within the community people that you're around. And it's about how you fit into a lot of things, whether or not you are able to be more secure in how you live your life. There's still always that overarching subconscious or conscious presence of how do you fit into this existence, right? And that's always dependent on how people treat you based on the information that they have on you, right? And so it's more about having the conversations with the people and to process how we want to be interacted with, right? If you can tell a story about how you grew up and you were treated really poorly because of blank, and these new people who are coming into your lives treat you the same way, you're not going to associate with them, or you shouldn't.
Yes.
Like
you shouldn't.
You shouldn't do that. Right. Versus if you have a counter experience that opposes, the treatment that you had, that you interpreted as like not good in the young brain, that makes you feel comfort, that makes you feel included, that makes you feel understood, right? And I think that's a very positive, good feeling, especially when you're from a community that typically doesn't get that, or doesn't universally get that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about, okay, heteronormative environments, okay, that's the default that is presented to this world. That is the privilege that they have, is that if you are straight in this world and you are coupled in a heterosexual relationship, that is the privilege you have, is that no one has to do any sort of questioning of you. No one has to, it's just drama. You can just have all the relationship drama, and that's the interesting thing.
Yes.
Right? It's not the sheer fact that you are dating or married or in a relationship with this other person. Whereas with, I think, when we talk about a queer identity or a queer relationship of any sort, that coupling in general is the concern. That is where the questions lay. That is where the judgment and sometimes the hate is, right? It's not, there's no understanding of wanting to be, like, I understand you told that story about your girlfriend and, having that positive effect on that elderly lady at the house or home. And that's great. And I think that those kind of micro stories are really impactful for those people involved. And that's needs to keep happening. I'm definitely on board with that. What my concern is that we come across like I guess I'm not even going to talk generalized. I'm just going to talk about what I know and what is present in my life, and that's, no one around me is going to be able to make me feel more welcomed in an environment. Like, no one can do that for me. I have to feel comfortable and understood in an environment. And for me to do that, I have to do what makes me feel safe and what makes me feel kind of capable of navigating that space. So if my trust check marks are all checked off, I will approach these people and have these conversations about my identity. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that if those like trust check marks are done, I typically don't need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Or it comes off as a more casual conversation, and it's not like a direct, like, coming out conversation.
Right.
Right? Whereas if I don't feel trust, if I don't feel comfort in the people around me, I'm like, okay, do I want to engage in this? And this is what I talk about when I don't talk about stuff at work, is because it's not their business.
Right.
I don't need to do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my job. And someone actually said it earlier. There's like, you don't have to be a goodwill ambassador, or Hell of a so you're not obligated to be an activist. Right. Yes. But here's the thing. This is my activism. Mm-hmm. Having conversations with you both and to have constructive conversation about it. Right. I personally feel more fulfillment doing this than trying to talk to Frank at the back of the 3-ton truck while we're trying to set up for film sets. Right. Like,
for sure.
Right. So yeah, I don't know. It's just, I feel like I'm just being a broken record now, but yeah, everyone knows my opinion on
I feel like you come from like a very survivalist mindset of like, this is, these are the ways in which you live your life to make your life like less complicated and safer.
Sure.
And and I feel like, and it changes from what group to group I'm in, but like for the majority of the groups that I'm in, because it's not like I'm going tons of places, meeting tons of strangers all the time. I basically, exist with the same 12 people every year. I feel like it's like, so I feel comfort. I feel more safe than unsafe. So I feel more confident having those conversations.
Sure. Yeah, I mean the basis of my history with you know, I've told you both this story off stream before, but it's just like the first time I was ever called a lesbian when I was 10 years old by some girl in my class. This is grade 5, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck that was. You just knew though, under the context of one being in a Catholic school and being that young, that word meant bad.
Yeah.
Right? So those conversations obviously had to come up at some point for a 10-year-old to be able to tell another 10-year-old this other thing, even without them understanding the context of it.
Yeah.
Right?
So that was knew that word meant bad.
Correct. So it's one of those things though, when I look back on it, and it's just like, yeah, that obviously had an effect on especially the specific word lesbian. You know, I had a struggle with the word lesbian for a very long time in my life. And that's why I identified only as gay for a long time. And I didn't want to be associated with the word lesbian, right? Because it was like lots of things. One, it was like, you know, and I know this might be conflicting for some people, but it's just like it was co-opted by pornography. My sexual identity was a category more pronounced and more important for the entertainment of the male gaze than it was for an actual development and connection with another woman. Right? Absolutely. Like that was one of the most frustrating things when I came to terms with that identity for me. I didn't want to associate myself with that word because it didn't have anything to do with men. Right? And then lesbian was also a grammatical difference as well. Like it was a noun almost, right? Like, yeah, if you're lesbian, you are a lesbian. Like you are this entity that is only lesbian, right? Whereas gay could be used as an adjective, right? Mm-hmm. Which was a little more casual in its defining factors of it. And you know, it just took time in understanding the identity and the label and researching and finding out, you know, why do I connect with this term lesbian so much? Well, because it defines me and how I interpret it, right? And it's complicated because again, you know, you may use the word survivalist, and I think that's probably somewhat accurate. But that's just mostly because I grew up in an environment where sexuality wasn't talked about. I went through a school system that was actively creating discrimination against a specific minority of people. And the patriarchy and the development of pornography made me feel really shameful of what I felt attracted to, because it meant that I wasn't having a true connection with someone. It was just meant to be for someone else. Right? So these like 3 factors of it, I think, have created a different perspective on how I identified and what labels I used. But I think honestly, I come back to that comment of like what eventually just becomes very comforting and true. And yeah, it's more about saying it to yourself and understanding yourself and understanding the label and identity that's attached to it. And the more you do it, you either become more attached to it and more comfortable in it, or, you know, like you said, things change. And, you know, either that's the fluid aspect of gender and sexuality that I think we all can understand can happen. But like the point I think I'm trying to make is that it's such a honed in reality when we're talking about identities, right? And there's no one flavor for one person. Yes. Oh no, there is. Sorry, I meant that the other way. There is only like a specific flavor for each person, right? And sometimes it gets mixed up and sometimes it doesn't. Some people just know, and some people just need to figure it out and try and see what fits. But I want people to understand, like, it's such a progression from childhood into adulthood and understanding these things. Like 10-year-old me had no context for the fact that I was called a lesbian without knowing what that meant. But really what it was is that this other girl in the class just really hated me for whatever reason. And she just thought of the worst thing that she could think of, and she just said that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I couldn't have said, like, what I just said. 10-year-old me could never understand.
No. Oh no, right. I was just called a bad thing. What is that? Why was I? That was a bad.
That was a bad. But for myself, that didn't mean that I was going to change who I was, right? And I have no explanation for that. I don't have, like, some people will hear something like that and they'll change everything about them so that they're so different, right? And that's not a judgment. Like, that's a survival thing too, right? But ultimately, I just kept going my course, and yeah, I was ostracized for a lot of it. Either because, you know, like, I didn't self-identify or understand my identity till I was like 16, 17, maybe, when I was like, I had the moment, and I was like, oh dear Lord, girls are really pretty. I think I like them, and not just in a friendship way, more in the gal pal way, you know, like that kind of stuff.
The roommate's way.
The roommate's way, even though that wasn't a thing yet, but yeah.
An inside joke for this channel.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's just the approach that I think people have to I think I'm saying more from the outside point of view is if it was like for someone trying to be an ally to someone in the queer community, it's just like the process in which you are actively listening will change drastically how you are capable of learning what this person is trying to tell you.
Oh yeah. And right? Even like if someone tells you a label, like that thing is not all encompassing of them. Like, they are not just that label. They are not whatever you perceive that label to be, because you are not a person who accepts that label, so you don't have as much of an understanding as that other person. Like, we should endeavor to, like, in our actual conversations with humans, in that, like, in the people we want to get to know, to imagine people complexly. And to not boil them down to one word or two. Even if the language itself is useful, it's only useful in the, like, on the very shallowest end of the pool. Because it's like just giving you sort of a direction.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I don't want to take away the reality of, like, I know we're joking about the whole teacup gay thing, but it was just like, for me, that really works.
Yeah.
Right? It's, for me, it's a, like, to be honest, on this show and streaming is like the most I talk about my gayness and openly and, without fear of a lot of things coming back. And in my everyday life, it's rather not a thing I think about too often.
Yeah.
But I don't want to take away from the reality that for some people that means a lot more, right? And I get why so much more of the percentile of their existence is focused on that, right? I think what it's just hard for is, like, for me, when it's not like the thing I think about, like, every day I wake up and I'm like, I'm gay. Like, no, that's not how I wake up. Although maybe I should start doing that. I don't know. Anyway, it's the dynamic of how much that is and where people are in their process of figuring that stuff out is never going to match up with every person, right?
Oh yeah. Do I just need to text you every day and remind you that you're gay?
No, not necessary.
That's okay.
As women are around me all the time, they remind me constantly just by existing.
That is honestly, like, if you come at all to the 2NPC stream that these two do at all, that is honestly one of my favorite jokes, is that Kara will say some offhanded comment that could be like construed in a gay way, and I will just type in chat, yeah, Kara, we get it, you're gay.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't even meaning it that way. And
yeah, not at all. Not at all. But
it's usually
Des
just
is
me
there
being
to remind me.
spicy.
Yeah. Well, okay, quick side convo, because this is an interesting thing about this identity thing. And it's interesting point to your point, Des, as well, as how you felt comfortable being, you know, as you're more in a an environment that you're comfortable with. When I was working on the documentary with Des, there was this moment where we were all hanging out at this Airbnb bedroom and shooting the shit. We're just whatever. And I remember at one point there was like that understanding of like, I'm in a safe space. More than half the people in this room identify as something queer. I guess I can like test the waters a little bit with this, right? And I think that was a really important experience for me, because where I live, and it's not like I lived with Joe for a long time, and at the moment, Joe, I didn't know that you were having questions about your identity. Like, there really wasn't that conversation we ever had when we lived together. But now when I retrospectively look back on it, I'm just like, holy shit, like our apartment was super gay. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was an environment that we were very supportive of one another, and there wasn't any judgment on that. And I don't know if I have ever said anything to you over the years that would have been problematic in that way. Maybe I have. But it was something that I look back on and I'm just like, holy shit, I didn't have to be someone else or try to shift who I was ever at home. And that goes a lot to how Joe and I interacted with one another. And that was really important to me for sure in my development of understanding myself. But, it was just one of those things, Des, where, everyone, I really hope people who are trying to figure out their identity has that experience where you just feel, comfort in the community.
Important. It's important to feel safe.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very lacking experience that a lot of people have, to be honest. I very much understand how some people can be born into small towns and just never run into another queer person and feel so alone. Like, that's a very real feeling. Because there's a part of them that they just don't see reflected back at them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, at some point, especially if you have, like, very limited exposure to anything like that, like, at some point, you just want someone else to be the thing that you are, just so that you're not the only one.
Mm.
It's like, oh gosh, I am not the only. Because like even like growing up, because I didn't grow up here. I grew up in another place in Ohio, and like a very a not as accepting portion of the state, because currently I live in a little blue city in a very red state. But like my cousin, who is married to a man, like came out to me as bisexual, but like not in like a big way. Like she was like, oh yeah, I'm bi, like, or like talked about a girl she dated once or something. And I was like, what? You're in my family and you are one of the gays? And I was like, just to the point where I was like just sort of coming out to my friends,
right?
And I think she knew that, because I think she sensed it within me. Just we had too many conversations about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and like
right,
and like Zoe from Firefly. But so I think she felt safe to be like in, because our family's like less conservative than other families, but not super accepting in certain spots. So like it was just nice to have that sort of representation of like, oh, there's more. It's not just me and my weird teenage friends. You're like a real adult with a real job and a real marriage, and you are one of the gays. Like, I just remember that, like, blowing my mind.
Right. Well, I think that was another part of, I guess this is kind of moving more towards to our second topic about coming out rather than identities. I'll just shift gears here for a bit. I don't know if you both are okay with that.
Yeah.
Or if you still have stuff you want to talk about the prior topic. Is that coming out when you are a dependent is, I think, something that is relatively a struggle. I think that there are different circumstances when you have so many other pressures put on you during this kind of like discovery of yourself that is really, really quite unfair. And it's not to say that that can't happen where like you hear stories about like young kids coming out when they're like 8 and their family's like, yeah, this is so great and blah, 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 and life is normal. And you're like, holy fucking shit. How did that happen? Because that certainly wasn't my experience. But yeah, I remember there being a really shocking thing where like for me, Joe was the second person I came out to. The first was my aunt, and then it was Joe. And I didn't tell Joe until I had spent 45 days with them in Japan and tested out that kind of friendship situation before we had conversations about living together. And I had this really big pressure of being like, okay, I'm transitioning from moving out of my parents' house and being this dependent to my own life and my own way forward. How am I going to exist with another person without them knowing this like really important part of who I think I am? And that process was like super stressful. Like I had not told my parents yet. And I actually had to ask my aunt to bring in Joe into her office so that we could have this like sit down conversation about it. And it was, I had a panic attack before I went in there because I was so nervous. Because to me, I was just like, I'm going to lose my best friend at the time, right? By doing this, and nothing's going to work. I'm going to be stuck at home, and I'm not going to have this person to go live with and explore independence, as I love independence. And it, I mean, I don't know, Joe, you can tell your side of that, but for me, it was like extremely stressful. And I was freaking out. And at one point, my aunt just like had to pull me out of the bathroom to be like, you just need to do this. And she just like kind of pushed me into the office to have this conversation. And I like said,
I just thought you were going to tell me you were dying or something.
Yeah,
like
I
that.
know.
Like,
Yeah, like I was about to ask, like, what did you think was happening? Was she about to reveal to you that she had like cancer or something? Like,
I mean, not to diminish it, but it's a little like, oh, you're okay, you're gay. That's what was all this for then?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Not to diminish your feelings there, but it was just like I was bracing myself for something different. I don't know what. Again, cancer, dying, secret MRA. I don't know.
That would have been something.
Again, I don't know. And
Yeah,
it's like,
no.
oh, that's it. Again, not to diminish it, but it didn't change much about how I saw you, right?
No. And I think that's what we talk about, is having this environment where people obviously are not seeing queerness as this like other thing. It's just another part of a human that we know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But for me, it was like many, many years of, if I say this out loud, you know, I'm not Catholic. You know, the last time I was in a Catholic church, I was 11. And participated. Well, I shouldn't say I've been in a church since then, but like went to church to be at church.
Yeah.
I was about 11. So since then, it had been almost 10 years where this voice inside my head is still saying, if you say this out loud and you tell people, you are damned. Like, you are undesirable, you are cursed, you are going to hell. Like, whether or not, you know, I've had that said to my face, not directly, but within a classroom setting twice in my life. I remember both of them very clearly. But it was one of those things where no matter how much I was trying to repress that feeling of that and being like, I trust Joe. I want to tell Joe this. I need Joe to know this. It took everything in me to like suppress that panic of being like, I know that this isn't true, but I have to move past that so that I can tell people who I care about the authentic me, you know, that kind of conversation. So, but like looking back on it now, like I can laugh with Joe when Joe says like, were you dying? Like what was happening? Because I can also look back now and be like, oh baby Kara. You just didn't have anyone there to help you through that, really, right? And there was no guidance, and I think that's what the most isolating thing about coming out is it's just very isolating, unless you have like a mentor or someone to help you through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't know, like I wonder if that's a common experience. I don't know if that's, you know, the same now today as it was 10, 15, 50 years ago. Probably not.
I mean, probably in certain places.
Like, well, I mean, even in our chat here, someone saying, Empty Set was saying, feeling like a political football, right? And that they haven't come out to their family right now, right? Because I think that's the other downside to sort of queerness being in the common vernacular, social vernacular, is uninformed people will form an opinion on something they know nothing about, right? Like trans people and bathroom bills are irritating as fuck, like discourse to wade through, because you have people that are, you know, cis and privileged, sitting back commenting on stuff they have no fucking clue about, and they have no idea how it impacts other people, right? But because it's a talking point on CTV News or something like that, they feel that they can just sit back and form an opinion from the sidelines and that there's no consequences to that. Meanwhile, their kid might be trans, right? Mm-hmm. And in that moment, they're creating a barrier, right? And, you know, it's, I don't think it's any less again, I struggled with claiming identity. I struggled with coming out. I don't know that I'll come out to my parents, my family, my bio family anyways, right? Not that I have to, not that anybody has to come out to their bio family, right? That's not a requirement. You get to choose the people that you feel will accept that of you. No pressure to come out to anybody. Your bio family doesn't owe them, you don't owe them anything. Didn't realize that was a soapbox I have there. But I still think it's still isolating, because I think we actually talked about this, Kara, shortly after, or maybe a year or two after, but just like, it still is scary thinking that you might lose somebody, right? Even though this person you're telling, you're like, I have 99.99% sure this person's going to be okay with this. There's still that 0.1% chance that it might flip on you, right? Mm-hmm. And that's still scary, right? And because it's a person you care about, there's even more at stake, right? I'm pretty comfortable saying it's not. I think it's slightly easier, but it's also more tiring, because like Empty Set was saying, it's in the larger discourse. And so now if you come out as non-binary or trans or something like that, I think people might launch into a similar collection of invasive questions like they might do for someone coming out telling them that that they do sex work, right? You know, like, what surgeries have you had? What were you born with? What were you, like, all these horrible questions, because they're in those discourses. So there might even be more at stake now. right? Because it's like, not only are you not going to be accepted, but you're going to have to be the ambassador of trans people, or the ambassador of queer people in general, or the ambassador of non-binary people, right? And field all these questions. And yeah, so it's hard to say, but I don't think it's any less scary or isolating. That's just my thoughts.
Oh, totally. I mean, it was interesting you were just saying about it as well. It's just like, I tell you, the few people who have outed me to people whom I didn't want to know, you know, you want to talk about having an interesting dynamic with those types of people now too.
Yeah.
You know, like it's such an individual factor, because I know that I've also met some gay people who are just like, yeah, I don't care who knows. You can tell people, I don't really care. And you're just like, okay, well, I don't know when that would come up in conversation for me to talk about your sexuality with another person. But anyway, the reality is that there is a very distinct breaking of consent when you're outed to people whom you choose not to tell. And that's a very distinct complication, I feel like, that you have to do when coming out as well, because you're dealing with a conversation that should have been direct with someone, and now you are working through other people, or they are working through other people to come back at you with it. And it's something that I don't think a lot of straight folks especially don't quite comprehend how harmful that can feel. And it's not to say like I hold my sexuality as a secret. That's not it at all. My sexuality is just a part of myself that I keep kind of behind a passcode. You know?
It's the back of the t-shirt and under the jacket.
Yeah. Exactly. That's
you
so
can choose
good.
to take it off of your life.
Shit. It's on, yes, it's on the t-shirt, not on the back of the jacket. Holy shit. Yes, that's exactly it.
I mean, like, because I've come out at least 3 like major times in my life, because I came out initially as bisexual when I was a teenager. I was in high school, and that was actually fine because I only initially came out to my close group of friends. And I remember, because a couple of my other friends were bi, I remember like coming up to them at the locker. Like I remember this so like clearly, and I don't have a ton of memories of like my childhood, my early adulthood. But like I remember coming to them up to the locker, and I was just like, you know what? I don't think I have a preference. And that was like how I came out. And they like instantly knew what I was talking about.
Right.
They were just like, "Ooh, yay! That's nice." Did they do this? Yeah, it was tiny claps. It was very good. I think I got hugs or something. But like,
okay.
But like, and I had been like, I had known them for like 2 years, and I had been like quasi flirting with girls like all around me for like 2 years, and like I think they just like knew, they had like figured it out. They were just like, oh, that's nice that you're telling us. Very good. And so like my friends, I had that really good reception too. My parents was very weird. I don't remember how I told my mom, but I remember specifically how I told my stepdad, my conservative stepdad, is that I was at the very tail end of high school, I was in a throuple with a guy and a girl that I knew from like some of my hobbies. And I came home from like going over to go spend time with them, and I came back and I had hickeys. They were like, and my dad was like, where the fuck did those come from? And I was like, my girlfriend. He was like, I thought you were dating that dude. I am. My dad was just like, okay, fine, whatever. Just like, it was just like, he just like begrudgingly just like was just like, I don't know how to deal with this, so I'm just going to say okay and then never talk to you about it again. Which
right.
Like, I've been dating my current girlfriend for 4.5 years, and sometimes when I say her name and I like talk to my stepdad about it, he's like, "Who is that?" It's like he like anything that has to do with my gayness, he's sort of just like in one ear out the other. He's like, "I don't know how to process that. I don't know how to accept it, so I'm just not gonna think about it."
Mm-hmm.
But I still love my child. I'm going to continue to love my child, but I'm just going to ignore the things that makes me confused about that person.
Right. Yeah.
My biological dad, on the other hand, when I told him, he was like, "All right, cool, like whatever." Like he has like my biological dad is also the eternal like he's 50 something, but he acts like he's 25. He hangs out with people that are like like younger than him, and he still goes out and he's just not like a person who acts like his age, and he's always sort of been more of my friend than my dad. And so it was much easier to come out to, because it was like coming out to one of my friends. I was like, "Oh, I have this girlfriend, and she lives a ways away. I would like her to come visit me," and I was living with him at the time. And he was like, "Oh, okay, cool." The real stickler to that was when I invited my girlfriend over to stay for like a weekend, and it was fine that she stayed in my room, but I invited my boyfriend over to come stay for a weekend, and he did not want my boyfriend to stay in my room. And I was like, "Isn't that a little sexist? Isn't that like kind of invalidating of like my female relationship? Like it's not that important?" And he was like, "No, it's just that your girlfriend can get pregnant." Right. I was like, "It's fine. You're gonna deal with it. I pay rent." It was like an argument we had over several weeks, and then like whenever my boyfriend showed up, I was like, "He's staying in my room." My dad was just like, "Can't tell you to do nothing."
Right.
Because at the time I was like legally an adult and I paid rent, and it was like
right.
Yeah, there were very few things in which I was like made to do in that situation other than be a good roommate.
Right.
Because my dad also brought girls home, and I was like, no. If you expect me to pay rent,
this is a double standard.
Like this is I'm 19, and I'm like, this is a double standard. I pay rent, sir.
Yeah.
I can take whoever I want in my room.
Yeah.
Very sassy teenager. But I had lots of older adult friends who, well, not super old, but like friends who were like in college who had much more of a like degree of like independence. So I was like, I'm entitled to that independence.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I did not. Spoil alert. I was 19. But like, so my first coming out was like sort of fine, and it was sort of gradual. It was like sort of like you people, and then it's fine. But like, because I was still mostly dating dudes at the time, like the people who even thought that like me being bi was unacceptable thought that I was behaving, even though my identity was unacceptable, thought that I was behaving in an acceptable way. When the reality is that there just wasn't a ton of gay girls that I knew, so my options were limited. And then like coming out as a lesbian and just being like, I am done dating dudes. I actually don't like it. I just like attention, and I need to be able to separate those things. And like, when I kind of came to that realization, I was like, oh, okay, like this is it. So like I had sort of a similar like conversation with my conservative dad, and I was like, he asked about me getting a boyfriend or something, or me having a boyfriend or whatever, and I was like, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen ever again. And what? Thanks, what? Internet is rating with a party of 41 raters.
Hello.
Whoa! Raid!
I guess so. Welcome.
Hello, new people. Thank you all for joining. Thank you so much. Thanks, Internet. That's a fun time.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Internet raid. Hey,
Oh,
thanks
well,
for
look at that.
bringing people over. Guess what? We're talking about gay shit.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
Very shocking, very surprising. We are talking about the gays. Specifically, we're talking about coming out.
Yes, yes.
Which is everyone's favorite gay topic.
It's everyone's universal experience that is sometimes horrifying.
Sometimes horrifying.
Well, okay,
Usually
right.
horrifying.
So does you hit, okay, so your first coming out, your second coming out, and then how did your third go?
So second coming out was like fine with like my friends and like most of my family. My dad had some questions. He was like, but what? Mm-hmm. But what? And then, you know, there's a whole lot of like, I talked about this in therapy, blah, 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 all that jazz. So that was fine. But I also had sort of, and I was also coming to terms with like the term lesbian at the time, because even at that time in my life, I had like dated trans people. And I went to women's festivals in which they would, like, the people at those festivals would not consider me a lesbian because I was not specifically only attracted to cis women. And so like that was like a whole thing, coming to terms with like the term lesbian, which is why I'm much more comfy saying queer now, because I don't have to deal with any of that baggage, which I recognize as my own personal baggage from my own personal experiences, but that's why I personally choose the term queer. The third coming out is still in the process. That's only been like very fucking recently when but that's like sort of where I have like sort of the opposite experience to like to the queer people who are like outed non-consensually. When it came to I would have been really concerned with my first coming out had somebody else outed me without my consent. Like I would have been devastated. Right. Luckily I never had to deal with that. But with my third coming out, I was so fucking tired of coming out that I was just like, tell everyone. Tell your friends, tell your dog. I'm going by the they thems now. Put it on my fucking Twitter profile. All 1,200 of my followers can see that I am a they them now. And I still on the daily have to come out to someone. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like I got a they them pin the other day because I'm just so tired of having the conversation. Just exhausting. Mm-hmm. And so I'm still like, I feel still like I'm in the middle of that process, because it's like I've sort of kind of talked to my parents about it a little bit. Like I'm still talking to like some of my clients about it, like how, you know, for the new people, I am quasi a sex worker, so I work in sex work. So like some of my clients, like trying to get some of them, like the ones that I've had for a long time, to refer to me by the correct pronouns. Some of them I know do not give a shit because, you know, they just want my nudes, and that's fine. I don't give a fuck. But if you're going to have like an engaged dynamic with me, then I have very few things that I ask, and that is one of them. But yeah, I still feel like I'm very much in that process. I'm coming out all the time, and it's annoying, and I would like it to be over. But whatever, I'm just gonna keep doing it because I feel personally bad whenever I get misgendered. It makes me feel bad about myself. So I would like to not feel bad. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's okay.
Yeah. It might be the whole point, actually.
Actually.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, for changing all of your pronouns everywhere and saying fuck it. Mm-hmm. Yes. Let them know.
It's the way to go.
Just let them all know and let them deal with it. You can deal with it on your own terms. Don't talk to me about it. I don't care. Google
it. Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting that you had such a almost like laissez-faire experience with your bio dad.
Yeah.
When you first came up, because it's just like for me and with my parents, and I mean, I'm a little bit hard on myself because my coming out process wasn't like to my parents anyway, the way that I really wanted to do it, just because I was kind of overstricken with a lot of just like immobilizing fear about being disowned. And that just happens when you grow up in a household where things are just not talked about, right? And, you know, with my mom, I kind of had my aunt like soften her up a little bit and like had a pre-chat with my mom before I talked to her. And even then it was, I mean, it was with my mom, at least she was more upfront about like, I have concerns, I have questions. She you know, some things were said that, you know, even to this day I feel like a little bit, you know, was hurtful at the time, but I know that she's learned since then. Whereas with my dad, I wrote like a fucking novel for my dad. Like it was like 8 pages both sides.
Jeez.
And it was just like this word vomit of laying out all the fears I had about him not loving me anymore. And I don't know if he kept it. I don't know if he would have or not. But anyway, it was one of those things where I look back on it now and like I delivered it and I left because at this time I was living with Joe, and this was like a prerequisite in my mind. I was like, I cannot live in the same house when I do this, right? I need to be able to go somewhere in case things go bad. And that was like one of the check marks that I had to have. And then when he did read it, he's like, I need to see you. And like, it wasn't terrible. The whole thing was, he's just like, I still love you. I may not understand this, but know that I still love you. And you sit there and you're going like, okay, great. Like I have 2 parents who are like kind of going to go with this. Mm-hmm. But you know, without this turning into a therapy session, my father and I have never talked about it since. Yeah. So it's well over 11 years. And it's more of the same situation where the conversation of sexuality just isn't within their lexicon, really. And so it's a very weird feeling when you have something that you have built up inside of you your entire adolescence, and then you say it, and then they're just like, okay, and then you're just like,
we're just never going to talk about it again. Okay.
Cool. Okay. We're never going to talk about, you know, if I did have a girlfriend and brought her over, I'm like, this is where my anxiety is now, where I'm just like, how would my parents react to this? Because they don't have the experience of dealing with that. Right. I'm just like, holy fucking shit. I'm going to have so much anxiety. Like they're going to say something so fucking stupid because we don't have these conversations and they're not interested in the conversations. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And my interpretation of that, of course, is like, oh, I really hope that this isn't just tolerance and it actually is acceptance. But how can you be accepting if you're not willing to educate either yourself or ask questions or whatever it might be, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's not that I have bad relationships with my parents. I actually had time to build a really good relationship with my mom, and my dad and I just operate on this silent level of consciousness. Yeah. And we kind of get one another. But yeah, it's kind of like the weird thing that exists within us where there is something about getting pride from your parents with that acceptance. And even though they do know and you do come out, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it's going to shape up. And obviously we know what the other side of that is too. And, you know, you hear about these really sad stories about people who are disowned or thrown out of their houses or, you know, left to find their own way through the world. And, you know, I acknowledge like I'm very, very lucky to still have my parents in my life. But it is something that you start looking at as well as you're just like, oh, they know, but do they know enough to still care about me the same way they would care about like another sibling who wouldn't be queer, you know. So it's I admit that's a thought that passes through my brain every so often, and definitely reflects on the information I tell them too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't really have much of a coming out story yet, because again, I only discovered this 5 years ago when I was 30, right? So I think I've been seeking and trying to find more late blooming non-binary folks, just because I think, and I've found a few people, and I think I've come out obviously to you, Kara, and a few close friends, came out to a few people at work, old work, because I think there's wisdom in the kind of like building that insulation, right? So that like if you come out at a workplace, that you have that insulation of people to support you, even if other people in the workplace aren't going to support. I didn't actually get a chance to come out at my old work, which was kind of unfortunate. But I think, I don't know, I really resonate with that whole story of the perpetual coming out and that it not being a big moment. Again, earlier I was talking about like I don't know about my bio family. It just doesn't feel, not that they're horrible or anything like that, but it just feels like I don't care to walk that path. I don't know. It's just not important to me.
Yeah.
And we don't have that kind of relationship anyways, right? That sort of deep personal emotional connection. So it's like, I just feel like I would have to explain too much. And yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm a very big advocate for, I said it before, just like you don't have to come out to everybody. You don't have to come out to specific people. You don't have to come out to biofamily. You don't have to do any of that. You can do what feels right, and that's just where to go. But again, I'm very new in this process. 5 years is not a long time, and 5 years is especially not a long time when I lived 30 years seeing myself and thinking of myself as one way that was not who I was, right? So when I think about that, I have a lot more unlearning to do that I'm more focused on than coming out correctly.
Yeah, than like educating other people.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I'm still making sense of this for myself. It took me a couple years to even feel like I could claim the identity, let alone advocate for myself and come out. Again, I'm trying now in little snippets here and there, new workplaces, contract work, instructors I was talking about before. I'm planning to be upfront about my gender identity in my new job and all that, because I'm grounded enough in it that I'm like, I'll roll with whatever comes my way. But again, it's my coming out story is still being written, so that's all I'll say right now.
I would like to pull up. I realize I haven't done this the whole stream.
Turk is also a late blooming MB.
Yes, we love late blooming MBs.
There you go.
Turk.
Well, we love all.
Turk. Sorry.
Turk. I'm still sorting out my B, but I've always felt like I'm a star-shaped thing in a world filled with circles and squares, and I could move through them, but they're not my shape form, and I've never felt I fit. I think the beautiful thing, because on the days I feel like it, I'm, sometimes a little rose-tinted glasses about it, but like, we're all star-shaped things, but they're all just different, because the reality is that all the stars are different. That's why, we have our fucking gay space background. Because we're all just different shaped star things. We're all different shaped star dust. And, like, we perform a huge disservice to ourselves when we take a label we identify with and we constrict ourselves to just that space. Like, to fitting in, like becoming a strange shape from trying to fit in. It's just be the shape you are. and then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in 6 billion years explode.
Yeah.
I mean, we all came from cosmic carbon from something.
We're all stardust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
to get poetic,
I will say I do really appreciate that Turatar, that I've never really felt that I fit in, because that's what always pushed me. And like earlier we were talking about like evolving identities and stuff like that. This has been a common narrative on our channel here, but like I've always felt like I missed the memo, and then I found feminism. Like, oh, okay, well, feminism is teaching me that like my masculine gender identity is something that's socially imposed, and that there's gender scripts, and like, okay, that's why I felt like I've been missing the memo. But then as I marinated with the feminism for a while, it's like, no, something still doesn't feel right. And then I think it was actually hearing trans folks talk about knowing what their gender identity was, right? Knowing that they're a woman, knowing that they're a man. And I think that's when it started to really click for me, where feminism was sort of like failing me in that moment, where it's like, I don't know that I'm a man. I don't feel like a man. I don't feel like a woman. And so I again was thrown into that abyss, that purgatory, I guess, of gender identity, where I was like, so people feel like a gender. That was very confusing to me, right? And then it wasn't until I read an article where someone was describing non-binary, how some non-binary people feel that their gender identity is null, like there's nothing there, right? And that's when it kind of clicked, because that's my relationship with my gender identity. It's like it's a non-binary identity, but like it's null, right? It's not definable. So I like to think it's infinite and nothing at the same time, and I like that, you know. But it's probably the most like philosophical way to approach it. But yeah, I don't know. That's again, I just really resonate with the fact that never felt like I fit. I still don't feel like I fit anywhere, but I'm okay with that. That's part of my interpretation of my gender identity, I think. So
yeah. I mean, I used to make the joke all the time. Like before I came out as I also tested the waters a lot before coming out as non-binary, and I was able to do so through like working in sex work. And one of the things that I like to tell people was my sexuality is ambiguous and my pronouns are daddy. Like really truly becoming daddy online, like because like for all the online spaces I am the daddy des, and like in like a scene context my title would be daddy. Like some people are mistress or, you know, sir or goddess or domina or whatever, and I didn't feel like any of those names like fit me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was existing in the scene, and I was like coming into my own as like not just being like an assistant or a producer, like I was becoming like a figure. And it was like I needed a name, I needed a title to distinguish myself from the clientele, and also tell them that I am in a position of importance, especially when I was running events, because like I didn't want the clientele to look at me like I was another submissive, that I was like there to like take care of the girls and like do submissive oriented type things. Like I didn't want them to see me in that capacity. So and it's actually my friend Noelle who actually sort of birthed this idea, because we were doing like a toes and tees party where it was all like about foot worship, and it was honestly it's like probably one of the tamest like BDSM parties I've ever been to. It was all just feet stuff.
I like toes and tees though as a party title. That's
yes,
I love that. Yeah.
Toes and tees. And because all the ladies are wearing these very like body slick outfits, and they don't have any pockets, and they're all wearing heels, and I'm the only person in pants in the room. Like I was the one who was handling the money whenever clients would want to go and have private foot sessions in the room with one of the girls. And this sounds like I'm for people who don't, this sounds like I'm a pimp. I'm not. Like, I work with a collective of other dominatrixes. I was just being handed the money to hand back to them later.
Because you had pockets.
Because I had pockets. And that's the only one in the room with pockets. And at some point, she was like, she came and she sat, Noelle came and sat on my lap, and she wanted some decorative item. And I also, like, I handle finances at the studio, and I handle some of the, like, buying decoration or buying new toys or furniture or whatever. She wanted something, and I was like, absolutely not. Like, it was some crazy idea with some crazy decorative item, and I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not gonna pay for that. She came over and she sat on my lap and she threw her arms around me and she said, "But Daddy," and I was like, "Fine, you can have whatever you want. You can have whatever you want." And then throughout the rest of the night, anytime any of the clients wanted to go do like a private foot session, the girls would just be like, "All right, now go hand your money to Daddy," and that's where that was born. And I was like, wait a second. I can use this to my advantage in my new non-binary feelings. If they just call me Daddy, that's like sort of a gender fuck term. And like, so I'm getting closer to the gender fuck reality that I desire. Yeah. And so like that became my official scene name. And so it's funny because I didn't even think of it. Like I didn't think of Daddy Does. It was just something that Noelle was using to get whatever stupid
what she wanted.
But Daddy, I was like,
"Oh, you got sucked in, Des. You got pulled into that.
I'm too gay for this, Noelle. You can't do this to me."
I would say you caved. I feel just a little bit.
100%. Yeah. I don't know that I actually ever bought the thing that she was asking for.
Oh, really?
Like, because it was kind of a joke.
Right.
But like, still, it was just like, fine, it's stuck.
Yeah.
And now I am Daddy, and honestly, that's like been really good for my development online. Is like my online persona is like, and it's a way in which clients can interact with me, and they can see and like they recognize what I represent within the community, like my social standing within the community, and that's been very helpful.
But I think that just sort of nicely sort of encapsulates what we've been talking about tonight. Is like, identity is something that we define for ourselves, but it's also something that comes our way, right? Like, again, I stumbled on the article around non-binary with the particular definition of non-binariness, right?
One that spoke to you specifically.
Yeah, one that spoke to me specifically. And so, but the thing was, it wouldn't have existed if that other non-binary person hadn't have written that article, right?
Yeah.
So, and that, like in your instance too, like it was a happenstance kind of thing, but I just think that it's serendipitous in the way that, like, here you were in this like gender journey, right? And this moment happened where something was offered up that fit, you know, and now you have light bulb turned on, and now it brought something to you, right? So I think it's kind of fun in a way that these identities evolve over time, you know, and yeah.
That we are ever growing and ever learning about ourselves and about the world. It's pretty fantastic. Sometimes it's frustrating and fucking stupid. But
absolutely. I think 68% of the time it's frustrating and fucking stupid. But in those moments
where it's like, I just like during this conversation, I got a DM from a friend and they were like, "I corrected myself today because I misgendered you on accident, and I corrected myself and I'm making progress, and I want you to know that I'm respecting your gender." And like, that makes me really happy.
Yeah.
Like, share your successes with me. Like, I appreciate that you're beginning to use the language that makes me happy, and that, like, especially with this specific person, that you're understanding where I'm coming from and how I see myself, and like, and that makes me feel seen, and that makes me feel good.
Well, I took great joy in like when I first came up to some folks at work and they started correcting themselves. Like, that was a lovely experience for me to encounter, because here I was taking the step out, right? And yeah, the person made a mistake, but they corrected themselves right away, and it got better over time. And it was like, that was a really, really cool, validating thing to see.
Yeah.
It was just like, holy shit, other people are taking this seriously. And that was fucking mind blowing to me, because again, I talked about earlier in the stream, but like, it was so, you take these baby steps out, right, onto this ledge and realize that the ledge isn't going to break. And not only is there a ledge there, but there may be a whole other balcony, whole other building to explore, you know. But yeah, no, again, it would get just recently with the one instructor that used my pronouns, it cancels out the other two that didn't, right? Because it's like, fuck yeah, she didn't make a big deal of it. She just casually integrated they, them into her instruction. Nobody else seemed to notice, which was fine by me, because I wanted her to know what my pronouns were, and the fact that she used them was like, I like this human. This is a good human, you know. I don't need a big deal made of it. I just need you to use the right pronouns.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, especially something that mainstream media misses, is that like whenever mainstream media covers people's coming out stories, like they're almost always this like, you know, fucking on TV, like it's a drama point of the television show where their parents kick them out and everybody thinks of them differently and the world is terrible because you came out. And like there's so much of these like sad stories about coming out and about gay experience in the media, when it misses this whole other subsection of some people's coming out experience, which is just being accepted.
Yeah.
And like and there are parts of coming out that are good and silly and fun, like, you know, people correcting themselves and like being nice about it, or people making their first gay joke at you, but not like in a bad way. Like they're just like they're trying to show that they understand that you're gay by like being like, hey, that girl's cute, or like whatever. Like they're trying to show you, hey, I accept you by integrating this into our dynamic. The fact that I know this thing about you.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the first time like one of my dude friends who I had like come out as gay with, and he looked at some girl and then he looked at me and he like looked at and he like gave me the elbow, like the sort of elbow that you like he would give his guys whenever he was looking at a girl, and like and he just sort of like gave me the elbow and like gave me the nod, and I was like, I already saw it. Like, this really cute girl walked by. It's like, I already saw it.
Yeah.
And then he just started laughing. Like those little moments.
Yeah.
You know, again, not the most woke thing, but like it was him trying to accept me into like in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to sort of interpret where he was at with understanding who you were, right? Yeah. No, I feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes it's fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes.
This is a totally different line of thought, and I don't want to start a whole other thing because I know we're already half hour past our usual runtime. But you know, it is very interesting how the interpretation of what some guys will think, like if they find out that you're also into girls, what they think they can do around you changes.
Yes. Like you're one of the boys all of a sudden.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I remember specifically, like, first off, this guy that I'm talking about is a very dear friend, and we all know, and I'm going to call him out because it's Alex, and he's fun. But I remember because we used to work out at the same gym. I hope Alex is. Alex, you in here? No, probably not. But it was very interesting where we were working at the same gym, and at one point this woman with like obviously a very attractive physique, wearing very tight like the leggings, was doing some squats, and Alex just leans over to me and goes, "Am I right?" And I'm like, "Alex!" And I slapped him on the back. And I was just like, you know what? Maybe she's just trying to be here to work out at the gym, Alex, and doesn't need your prying eyes going to that realm. Maybe she's just trying to become stronger and doesn't need that commentary, okay? And I'm very much like that, right? Because I feel like at gyms, especially, like women are very like oogled at. And there was this moment where I was sitting there and I'm just like, I had to be self-reflective of myself as well, because for my entire life, identifying as a lesbian, there's like a very predatory aspect to it, right? To how people interpret stuff. And for a very, very, very long time in my life, I would not even acknowledge women. I would just like walk by them from like, I know you're here and I identify your presence, but
I'm looking respectfully.
We're looking respectfully. And I still do. That's the primary aspect of how I see women, especially in public, because I don't want them to ever feel uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, that was like one of the things where I think Alex then kind of understood that like I don't do that, and that's not something I would do
not
in
the
the
kind
gym.
of person you are in general. Even if you were attracted to dudes, you wouldn't be the type of person to be like, "Ooh, that beefcake." Like,
no, I would not either. Exactly. So it was really funny when I started talking to him more and we started to get to know each other, and we're very, very good friends now. And we've talked about some really great things. But that was one of the earlier interactions that I remember happening and being like, Alex, get your butt over there in the other direction. I don't need this right now.
I love
so, but yeah, it makes for a good story.
Yeah. So yeah, we are definitely over. But you know, we're very excited to talk about being gay. So shock, surprise. Where's your little teacup? If anybody else has any final thoughts, or anybody in the chat has a like specific question, we can field that now. But if nobody else has anything left, we're gonna wrap it up here in a couple of minutes. I do want to say I love that you told the story of us being in the room in the documentary, and like you feeling safe enough to like talk about stuff around us. That makes me. I know my feelings don't matter in that situation because it was very much your experience. But like at being in that room and knowing that you felt safe enough to talk about that in that room, like makes me happy because
good.
I like being the kind of person that people feel like they can talk to about stuff.
Sure.
Because you know I want that in life. Oh my dog.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Lunar Tax. We think you're cool too.
That's very nice to say.
We think all the everybody in chat is cool. I'm just going to declare that right now.
Oh, hold on. If you like us that much, we also have a Discord that you should.
Yes, please drop that Discord link.
Hold on.
So for the people who are new here, this is sort of an offshoot of a show that Joe and Kara host every Sunday called 2NPC, where they just play video games and have fun being friends and buds, and we're all in the chat and we all hang out. We're a small little Discord group. And this is sort of the time we take every other week to discuss things that are a little too serious to talk about while playing video games. And you know, we all have lots of differing life experiences, and it's fun to be able to talk about topics from different lenses. And we do this every other week. The host rotates every other week. I believe Joe is the next host.
I think so, yeah.
Yep.
Joe, and drop your info in there too. I guess we should all do that.
Yeah, drop your info. You can also follow us on Twitter at LessThan3NPC.
We have a YouTube channel as well.
And we have a YouTube channel for all of our past episodes. So if you want to hear about us talking about polyamory, we talked about negotiation and consent in past episodes. We've talked about a lot of stuff, and the conversation is still going to continue. The conversation. Oh no, the Discord link is broken.
No. Terrible.
Yeah.
Let me fix that. It's almost like I know how to work the internet.
I got it.
You got it?
Yeah, I'll drop it.
Okay.
But we
I had to delete that.
we all exist in varying spaces on the internet. If you follow me on Twitter, please be 18 or over, because I do post adult content. Yeah.
I mean, most of our stuff is, I don't want to say not for kids, but
oh, it's definitely not for children.
Yeah.
But as I talk about my toes and tease party. Trigger warning, not for children.
But yeah, so
follow us. Continue the conversation in the Discord. We're just a bunch of nerds who all really like talking to each other and really like being our radical honest selves on the internet. Yeah. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
I think that's it. But
I think we're good.
We're good. We're good. It's fine. Everything's fine. The world is fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine.
No, it's not at all burning down around us. Not at all. Eggs territory.
Alrighty. Well then, I will sign us off. As usual, everybody, live well, laugh often, and hail Satan. Good night.
Good night, everybody.